Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dr. Dimitris Tsoukalas, PhD, MD, is a board-certified family physician, the scientific director of the Metabolomic Medicine Medical Group, president of the European Institute of Molecular Medicine, and an associate member of the World Academy of Sciences. Dr. Dimitris Tsoukalas is a medical doctor and scientific director of the Metabolomic Medicine Medical Group with clinics in Athens, Greece, and Milan, Italy. He is a pioneer in the prevention and treatment of autoimmune and chronic conditions, such as Hashimoto's thyroiditis, rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, systemic lupus, multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, Crohn's disease, and ulcerative colitis, by using metabolomic analysis. Metabolomic analysis detects deficiencies in micronutrients and the metabolic causes of autoimmune and chronic diseases. He is also the author of the best-selling book, How to Live 150 Years in Health. He has published more than 50 scientific studies and is a keynote speaker at international medical conferences for the detection of metabolic disorders and micronutrient deficiencies related to preventing and treating autoimmune and chronic diseases. Dr. Tsoukalas, it is an absolute honor to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you, Casey, for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's an honor to host you. Right off the bat, I have to apologize. I'm sure I goofed up your name. Maybe you can pronounce it for us.
It's normal. Everybody has a problem pronouncing that. It's not news. It's fine.
That's great. I also didn't mention in your introduction that you host a podcast as well, which is great. But I obviously don't. I believe your primary language is Greek. I can't understand anything you say in your podcast.
Yes, we have two podcasts, one in Greek and one in Italian.
Okay. Gotcha.
So
that's
yes.
either way, I'm a little bit hosed. Can't listen to either one.
Yes.
Well, you do such interesting work, and something that you pointed out, and we also mentioned in the introduction, you pointed out to me off the air, is most doctors in the metabolic space are looking at macronutrients, and we pay a lot of attention to, the fats, the carbohydrates, the proteins, the three macronutrients that we eat, and those are the major groups, which is why it's called macro. But you tend to focus on the micronutrients and the smaller nutrients, which I think is really interesting, and I'm very excited to chat with you about all of that today and how that relates to overall health and all those autoimmune and chronic diseases that we mentioned. But first, can you share a little bit about your background and your story of how you got into medicine to begin with?
Yes, my father was also he's still alive, a medical doctor, and I really liked the way he helped people. Actually, he became a doctor in the 60s. Medicine at the time was a bit different than now. The biochemical condition of the bodies was better, a lot better. So actually, medicine that period was treating mainly acute diseases, acute heart diseases that last less than 3 months, while now we are mostly suffering from chronic diseases that last more than 3 months. So I liked helping people. I like to be able to help someone that suffers. But while I started, after completion of my specialization, my residency, I started practicing general medicine as a family physician, and was the director of a state medical group. So I had the possibility to visit a lot of patients and a lot of conditions. And while acute conditions, the approaches we used were very efficient, in chronic diseases, I saw my patients coming back after 3 months, 6 months, and every time they were getting worse. So this was not what I joined for in medicine. I wanted to help, not just observe people getting worse. And this was in the beginning of 2000s. And that was also the period that also the internet, the access to scientific libraries was different, because before you had to go in person in a library, find an article. Not all libraries had all the journals, scientific journals. It was really difficult to make a research before the PubMed, and before the internet. So in that period, I started researching articles and other researchers and doctors that if they had found solutions for chronic conditions, and I found that there were a lot. There were a lot worldwide, and this was not pushed through the conventional lines of training. I started applying these approaches to my patients, and I saw incredible results. So I focused on that. And gradually I saw that the common factor was the loss of biochemical balance in the human body. And this was related to diet, to deficiencies in macronutrients, and as you said, to the environment, to lifestyle factors. And most of these factors, as we now know, more than 80% are modifiable. We can do something about that. And I then, in the way, I found that metabolomics, measuring small molecules in the human body, can help us accurately measure what's the deficiency in the metabolic dysfunctions and start applying not only by experience, but also measuring the exact dysfunction in each patient.
Mm. Wow, that's fascinating. How challenging was it for you to shift your practice that was, again, more conventionally kind of focused, probably focused more on pharmacological solutions for some of these chronic diseases versus addressing some of the lifestyle issues that, like you said, are so modifiable? How challenging was that for you to shift your practice into?
I have to say it was not challenging because it happened really gradually. So I start adding I don't think that we have to completely erase the diagnostic or the pharmacological approach. Medications can help alleviate pain, inflammation, and suffering. But using only medication, there's no way out because nobody's suffering from lack of a pharmaceutical product. So by giving medication, you resolve no problem. You just address some symptoms, which of course sometimes you need to do that. And but gradually adding some elements, adding diet, adding vitamins, I could improve the health. And the more I learned, the more I was adding. And gradually, after a few years, found myself just doing the metabolic approach and have minimal use of pharmaceutical applications. There is still some applications, but they are a lot less than we usually do.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. For you personally, did you notice anything with your own personal health that you were maybe dealing with that you hadn't appreciated until you found this? I find it so interesting. Most doctors have their own personal story that really coincides with the story of the things that helps their patients.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. While I started, as I said to you, about 2000 with observing this problem, in 2004, I became ill of an autoimmune condition, which is ulcerative colitis. Ulcerative colitis is an autoimmune condition of the bowel, where the immune system attacks the bowel and makes ulcers. So imagine I had 20, 30 diarrhea per day, losing blood and stool. It was awful. I had to use huge dose of cortisone. My daughter at the time was 2 years old, and I've seen that the future was not brilliant for me because I had to take immune suppressants and heavy drugs that probably after a few years would have destroyed my kidneys, my liver. So in 2004, I had to find the solution. I couldn't really agree with this no way out solution. So I started digging more than before. I've already started my research a few years before. But in 2004, I started a journey to resolve my condition. 2 years later, I was cured. And since 2006, now almost 18 years since then, I'm fine. I take no medications. I'm healthier than I was then 20 years ago, a lot healthier. And I'm very happy that I choose this path. So after helping myself and seeing the results also in others, I start addressing this problem to people with autoimmune and chronic conditions.
Yeah, wow. I've talked to people who have experienced ulcerative colitis, and they say it's absolutely awful. I know people that would have to travel around with rolls of toilet paper, like make sure that they always had it on them because they could have issues at any time. It sounds like a terrible condition to deal with. That must have felt amazing to finally cure that and reverse it.
Yes, it's an awful condition that alters completely the quality of life. It's not probably, for most patients, it's not a life-threatening condition. Although it's very debilitating, you have no strength. Most of people also, because of the side effects of the pharmaceutical treatment, they develop the kind of melancholy and depression. They have mood swings, they have weight problems, they low energy. It's a condition that alters deeply the quality of life of a person.
Yeah, wow.
But the
I think,
good thing is that this is something that is modified. You can change that. You specifically this specific condition. It's a condition that Crohn's disease, which is a similar inflammatory bowel disease, but attacks the whole intestinal system, not just the bowel. Is more difficult to address, but ulcerative colitis is something that is almost completely in all cases reversible.
wow. So in your own personal journey, obviously, like you said, it was a gradual approach, but what things did you learn and what things did you implement that made you able to reverse that and then help your patients later on down the road?
So what I implemented is that initially one of the first approach, even then 25 years now, the what seems the most workable approach was to lower carbohydrates. Because even at that time, even though this seems a late trend, it's not so late. It's something that many researchers and doctors used for many years now. And one of the trying various things, trying to improve my bacterial flora, trying to take out gluten, trying to do paleo, keto, intermittent, whatever approach. What worked the best was lowering carbohydrates. This was, and of course, taking out gluten. And this was a pivotal moment. But at the end, what I learned from that and what I'm applying today is that it's not one solution, one factor solution. It's not only what you take out from the picture. It's a multi-faceted approach. Our body needs 166 nutrients, which could be macronutrients, could be proteins, fats, could be water, oxygen, but also vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, amino acids, probiotics, fatty acids. All these 166 elements, they have to be present in a sufficient quantity. So that's why even most approaches and studies, we have the following problem. So we do a study and we provide vitamin D, or we provide vitamin C, we provide magnesium, K2, or probiotics, or omega-3. These are the most common studied elements. But the thing is that this is an approach, a study approach that comes from the way we study pharmaceutical products. The pharmaceutical product doesn't need help to act because in 99.5% of cases, medication blocks a metabolic pathway, blocks a reaction. So by itself can have the effect that you want. So if you have pain, you give a painkiller and this blocks the molecules that relate the pain in the nervous system. So you have no pain. Or you have excess of acid and you give something that blocks the production of acid and so on. Or you have inflammation. So you block something. But when it comes to the metabolic function of the body, you need to supply all metabolic pathways and all nutrients. So if the body needs 166 elements, you cannot provide 120. It's like, let's say we make a study and we take two groups. One group we give oxygen and the other we give water. They will die, both of them. One from lack of water and the other of lack of oxygen. And the result of the study is going to be that water and oxygen are not helpful in the human health. And this is what's happening. Seems so elementary, so basic, but this is what is happening with the state of research and clinical studies now in this field. And we have published that in a study in an article at the BMJ Nutrition Prevention Health in 2020, the aspect of the synergy of nutrients that are necessary to accomplish metabolic reactions in the human body. And recently, 2 months ago, we published another clinical study this time, which was a multi-level approach, because it's necessary to address both the diet and the macronutrients, as you said at the beginning, but also the micronutrients, and also, if necessary, provide some medication as less as possible, of course. But doing all this together, so you need a team of medical doctors, you need a team of nutritionists, you need a team of biochemists, of biologists, of statisticians to evaluate results, and so on. So you need a multidisciplinary approach to evaluate and be successful in this approach.
Wow, that's so well explained. I love that analogy that you gave as well with the two studies on oxygen and water. That's a good way to explain it. I do have one more personal question before we deep dive into these micronutrients and how we test for them. But as far as your own personal story, what you said is correct about the removing carbohydrates. It's trendy now, but it's not new. People have done it for a long time. They've written about it, at least 100 years ago, and we know, it is a primal diet that we would have consumed anyway. But at the time, especially back then, it was fairly early in what I would now call like the renaissance of a low carbohydrate diet. When you remove something or you reduce something, you often have to add something back in. So taking out the carbohydrates would normally mean you'd be eating a greater amount of fat. And most medical doctors are definitely trained that is not a good thing, and that's going to affect your cholesterol. And I know this is something that you write about quite a bit now, but what was that like for you? Like, you must have known that, like, yeah, it's a good idea to reduce the carbohydrates, but what if you're going to die of a heart attack because you're eating so much fat and cholesterol?
Yes, this is a common problem we face with our patients, but it's something we explained since the beginning. So when you put someone in a healthy diet, sometimes cholesterol can go up, sometimes go down, but mostly it will go up, because when you lower insulin, you increase the metabolic rate of fat in the body. So it's different when you have cholesterol that goes around in the body that has a lot of sugar, and there has a lot of processed and oxidized molecules, and these oxidize the cholesterol, and this could be problematic. But it's a completely different picture when all the markers go high, improve, and then LDL or total cholesterol goes up. It's a completely different metabolic picture. At the time, I have to say that early on, I never really made sense to me not to eat fat. In Greece, we have a tradition of eating meat, eating lamb, eating a lot of eggs and cheese and feta cheese, and we are really good in cheeses and things like that, and good quality fatty foods. Olive oil also is fat. So in the beginning, it was not a problem with me. The problem came as a collusion in myself when I realized that this cholesterol story is not exactly what we've learned. So it took me 3 years to really digest, because in the beginning I was thinking, I probably didn't understand something well. Probably something is, I'm missing something. So I have to go back and again in the books and biochemistry and the studies and research. I really couldn't believe that this cholesterol story is so different than we've been taught and to approach. So it took me really 3 years to digest these things before I realized that this is the story, and it's not the cholesterol the problem. At the time, I was already ready to ingest meat, fats, and butter, and olive oil, and good quality food.
Gotcha.
I had no problem.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the tradition. I obviously, in the introduction, we said that you're in Athens, you're in Italy. really, I believe, what most people would consider the heart of the Mediterranean. And Nina Teicholz did such a great job writing about this in The Big Fat Surprise and talking about how the quote unquote Mediterranean diet is something that we conjured up. It's not necessarily what people in the Mediterranean eat. We just made it to be this thing where it's like you just put olive oil on everything and you eat lots of fish. And so I did want to ask just a personal commentary on what the diet is actually like in places that we would associate with a Mediterranean diet, like Italy and Greece.
Yes, the idea of what Mediterranean diet is completely it's not true, because even in the blue zones, and we happen to, in Mediterranean, in Greece and Italy, to have three of them. So it's Icaria 1, Calabria, and Sardinia. All three zones eat a lot of meat, a lot of meat and cheese and fat. So there is some period because of religions, of religious in fasting. So sometimes of year there are two periods of 40 days, but there is a religious fasting before, with no meat, before Easter and for Christmas. And when Ansel Keys in the 30s, 1936, came in Italy and Greece and studied the Mediterranean, from the 3 trips, the 2 trips he's done was during these periods. So he got the idea that this is an area that they don't eat meat, which is, it was just those 2 periods of fasting, because it's completely different to eat meat and animal based foods all year and to fast for a period than to fast the whole year. This creates deficiencies in the body, and it's a huge problem. While fasting for periodic intermittent fasting or periodic fasting, it helps the body as exercise does, because the body for stress of limited duration gets regenerates and reorganizes its function. So this is a completely different idea of what Mediterranean diet is. And Mediterranean diet has a lot of meat and cheese and fats and olive oils and and of course other foods that also, because in Mediterranean diet there is also a lot of legumes. A lot. There is some legumes and greens twice a week, but it's different in different situations, because if a patient is in inflammatory condition, inflammatory state, he cannot digest, and he does not also have the microbiome to handle this food. So if you were born in 1930s, 100 years ago in Crete, and you had the microbiome which was so diverse, and you start eating this type of food from small age, and you developed in a very clean environment with no antibiotics, you can handle probably legumes and greens. But if you are in inflammatory state with a completely altered microbiome, with insulin resistance, with inflammations, with an immune system that is not functioning well, if you start with this approach, it's very difficult for the person to come out of it. Because we have people that can follow, they are in good condition and they do well with a real Mediterranean diet, because also the real Mediterranean diet has a low glycemic index foods. So it doesn't create insulin resistance. There's no processed foods. In Mediterranean diet, it's not the pizza. It's not mac and cheese and things like that. So they are minimally processed foods that have a very low glycemic index, and a person with metabolism in a good condition can handle that and can thrive with that.
Got it. Well, thank you for explaining that. I think I wish more people, at least around where I am, had an idea of what people in the Mediterranean actually eat, and realize that even within countries, within regions, that varies greatly depending on what's available, what's seasonal in those areas. And it's not just one particular diet. It's many different diets. So I appreciate that insight. Let's talk about the problem and kind of identify it and see where we are, state of the state as far as autoimmune and inflammatory conditions. It sure seems like they're becoming more and more prevalent year over year over year. So maybe you can comment on that. And then if that's the case, it's either that we are detecting them more, or our genetics are suddenly turning on us, where a few generations ago we didn't seem to have these problems and now we do. Yeah. What do you observe as far as the state of inflammatory and autoimmune conditions, and where do you think the problem is coming from?
Yes. At this moment in the US and Europe, autoimmune conditions are the #1 cause of disease. They outnumber at least by twice by cancer and heart diseases put together. The thing is that while there is a lot of conditions, more than 100 autoimmune conditions, each of them are studied separately. And most of them are not even, we don't have epidemiological data for them. So we have for a few of them. But even if you take Hashimoto thyroiditis, that is the most common, where the body produces antibodies for against the thyroid gland. We calculate now that in the US, 1 in 3 women has antibodies against the thyroid, because it's most common in women. But also other conditions like psoriasis and Sjogren syndrome and rheumatoid arthritis, ulcerative colitis, Crohn disease, they are becoming even common and more common. One of the explanations is what you said, that now we are more able to diagnose these conditions than in the past. But this is not true, because we have data. I can show you. I have a picture. I believe will help with that, if I can share that. Yes, here it is.
And for those of you listening, we have this on YouTube. We'll publish this, but I'll also try to describe this as best as we can.
Okay, I will try to describe that. So you see, we have 3 periods, period 1, period 2, and period 3. And this is the overall detection of antibodies in the blood of people, that this started in the 80s, then in the 90s, and then in 2012. So these are 3 periods of the past. And as you see, the antibodies in the general population rise in these different decades and periods, independent of, and they rise most in females, also in males, but they are more common in women than in men. And also, we see also teenagers and also adults above 50. These are the categories. So the groups that are more challenged with autoimmune conditions are women at a younger age and after 50.
Those are pretty steep curves. This is definitely on the rise according to every single one of the multiple lines. Again, we're seeing different, the antibodies taken at different times, but based on sex, based on age, and overall, and each one is a steep upward climb.
Yes. So it's not a condition of genetic predisposition or that we are best at diagnosing that. It's a real problem. It's a real problem. So we have a steep increase of autoimmune conditions because, and this is mainly due to, as we said before, it's the same cause, like all chronic disease. It's a lack of nutrients, because nutrients have an immune regulatory activity. I don't know if you ever heard that some people may be afraid, or even doctors, to give vitamin D or vitamin C to a person with an autoimmune condition, because they are afraid that this is going to enhance the immune response and they have a worse outcome in autoimmune condition. Have you ever heard that?
No, I haven't actually.
Yes. So there are sometimes patients come to me and they told me that the doctor or themselves, they are afraid to take an immune enhancing vitamin, because they are afraid that this could worsen their condition. But the reality is that vitamin D or vitamin C or other nutrients and vitamins, they regulate the response of the immune system. So if you give vitamin D, this down-regulates the attack versus self and increases the ability of the immune system to respond against pathogens. So one huge factor is lack of micronutrients that regulate the immune system. Then there is, of course, the alteration of the microbiome, because 80% of our immune cells are along the bowel, along the intestine. So, and they have a immediate, intimate relation with the microbiome. So alterations at the level of the microbiome alter the function of the immune system. And then you have also the insulin resistance, and this insulin is a growth factor, so it facilitates inflammation. So putting all this together, it comes out that we have chronic inflammatory conditions with an immune system dysregulation.
Well explained. And is it fair to say that, yes, there's many possible factors that contribute to that, but one of the strongest ones would be diet, that is a very poor standard American type diet that just has very high inflammatory foods? Is that pretty obvious?
Yes, of course, yes. The diet is a factor, because the diet acts in too much processed foods. They are lacking nutrients, and they have inflammatory elements. They create inflammation, they poison the mitochondria, they alter the microbiome, they increase inflammation. So this is multiple factors that occurs because of change the diet, of course, and also the alcohol consumption and sugar. And so people think that it's very common. I see, I don't know if you heard it around, but many people tell me that what they believe is causing their autoimmune condition is genetics and stress. Actually, genetic and stress are about 25%. The rest, 75, 80%, it's modifiable. It's lifestyle and diet.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. Now, if we've talked about this in the past, it hasn't been very deep. So I'm really excited to talk to you about this as well. Can you describe your work as far as what is metabolomics? How did you, again, kind of get into that? How does that work for people? How do you use that with your patients?
So when I started using this diet approach, also myself and other patients, and prescribing change the diet, lifestyle, and also supplements, I used to do that based on the existing literature. So what was found, and the approach was that we have seen that these diseases are the major deficiencies was this, and the major metabolic disruption was those, and so on. But this is a generic approach, and this didn't work to everybody. So, and imagine that when you start providing to a body that has a lot of deficiencies, the nutrients that are missing, new metabolic pathways are working better than before, because now you supply with nutrients. So while you start supplying, the body changes, and also the need of nutrient changes. So you have to be able to measure in regular periods and adjust until the body finds a final balance. And this, imagine that in this about 2.5 years to get the maximum of the results. So when I started applying this as a general approach based on the prior experience and clinical studies, I realized that if we are going to measure nutrients in the blood, the nutrients in the blood that do not reflect the deficiencies or the needs at the level of tissues or organs. Because the body, the last thing that is going to change is the blood. It's trying to maintain stable. Even if you speak about, as we said before, about water, if someone is dehydrated, a person that, I don't know, for example, a F1 pilot, Formula 1 pilot, or a dancer, they can lose up to 4 to 6 liters in one time, so while they race. So if you lose 6 liters, you cannot lose it from the blood. The blood is going to be the last one, because the blood is 4 to 5 liters, depending on the person. So the body is going to dissipate the loss of water and other nutrients, and the most of the loss is within the cells. So you are going to measure the levels of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, amino acids in the blood. They do not reflect what the body needs. So in order to to resolve this, in the 70s, Linus Pauling, which is considered the father of metabolomics, described that if we're going to measure chemical reactions that occur in the presence of nutrients, so if you have a chemical reaction that needs magnesium or zinc or another element, we're going to measure that and see if this chemical reaction occurs and it's sufficient. So if this reaction doesn't occur, you provide and you measure again, and then you provide more until this happens. So by measuring key chemical reactions in the human metabolism, we can extrapolate the data of what is the body missing and what the body needs the most.
Wow, that's fascinating. Bonus points for mentioning Formula One. Our new season's about to start here in a little bit, and very much looking forward to that. So great example. What are the most common deficiencies that most people have? You hear, obviously this is going to be very individualized, but generally speaking, you hear, vitamin D for most people is very low. Magnesium can be one you've already mentioned is very low. Do you see common patterns that are applicable to most people?
Yes, there are multiple deficiencies. There are multiple. They have some variation. Of course, there are common things because we are humans. So this is the body. The human body is very close one to the other, but there are minus differentiations based on the lifestyle and the genotype and so on. Of course, vitamin D is a universal lack of vitamin D. This is a huge. Imagine that vitamin D is like the RAM memory for a computer, because the hard disk, the information to function for the human body is in the DNA. So the DNA, to be accessible for thousands of genes, they have receptors of vitamin D. So you have this receptor, and the vitamin D connects and permits this information to be accessible. So the genes open, and this information can be read by the cells. If you don't have enough vitamin D, the information is not accessible. So in order to start everything in the body, you need to supply enough vitamin D. So what is happening with autoimmune diseases is that one of the main reasons that we have autoimmunity is that the receptors do not function, are dysfunctioning in the people that have autoimmune disease. So you need to give a lot more higher dose of vitamin D to overcome this dysfunction of the receptor of vitamin D. And very often when we prescribe high vitamin dose vitamin D, then they found high vitamin D levels, and they could be afraid of having toxicity because a lot of talk is done about how vitamin D can be toxic and so on. Actually, vitamin D exists in various forms. There are some which are activated or partially activated. They are used for pharmaceutical reasons, for medications, like with patients that have inability to activate this vitamin, like in osteoporosis or chronic kidney diseases. But the one we prescribe is the one the body produces with sun exposure. This is a provitamin form. It's not active. So cells can regulate that. So if they need it, they can absorb it and activate it. If they don't use it. So there's no toxicity with that. But even vitamin D, then you need, because it activates various metabolic pathways by providing enough vitamin D. So you increase the needs for the other nutrients that come after that. So vitamin D is a key nutrient. What I would suggest to anybody is, instead of trying to take single nutrients, because if you take single nutrients, you are going to always do nothing. There is no significant clinical improvement because you give one or you take one nutrient, and then you are lacking the next 165. And even if you take 20 nutrients, you are missing another 146. So one should start with a very good multivitamin as a base, and then should add vitamin D, vitamin K, magnesium, or whatever. Even for clinical practice, this is a more efficient way. So even for clinical research, we have suggested this as an approach. when we do a clinical study to provide a multivitamin to both groups, and then add to the one you want to study the effect of the nutrient you want to study to add the single nutrient.
Interesting. When we're talking about vitamin D, I want to say I heard you comment on this with the episode that you did with Dr. Berg. Is it true that there is 0 Hashimoto's in people that have adequate amounts of vitamin D?
I don't know that. What I said is that we found no person with autoimmune condition that has enough vitamin D.
Got it.
So could be really what you say, but we have never found a person with Hashimoto thyroiditis or with an autoimmune condition that have sufficient levels of D without supplementation.
Okay, gotcha. And then what you've described really, really well is we're talking about people that are already deficient in these key nutrients. Thus, we need to give them a much higher dosage. And
Yes.
so my first question is it possible to correct some of these deficiencies with food alone without the supplements? Does that just take way, way longer for a lot of people?
Look, food, even the best food, and based on the best food, the highest nutritional value, the best food is meat, eggs, and dairy. These are the 3 categories with the highest nutritional value. Then you have seafood also is good, and fish, and then you go down to olive oil and fruits and so on. But the 3 foods with the highest nutritional value and biological value, so because even, for example, legumes, they have proteins, but they are not as accessible to us as in the meat or the eggs. So we call that high biological value food. Even those food, though, in the last 100 years, they have lost 10 to 15 times the nutritional value. We have studies that have compared the nutritional value. So you would have to eat 10 to 15 times more to cover the needs and the deficiencies of the past. So this is not practical. In some cases that people do not have heavy diseases, this could be an improvement, or they do it because they just want to lose weight, or but in order to get optimum function of the body, you need to, based on my experience, you need to supplement. You have to go both ways, both the diet, because even supplementation by itself, that's 0. It's not that you give the supplements and you solve anything. You have to give the best food with correcting the deficiencies of the body.
Gotcha. And then I'm assuming there's a question of quality when it comes to supplementation.
Yes.
I'm not sure what it's like in Greece, but in the United States, it's completely unregulated. So anybody can put anything in a bottle, say it has anything, and unless it's third-party tested, you really just kind of don't know what's in the supplementation. So can you speak to the quality of the supplementation and how the average person would know whether they are taking something that's high quality or not?
The most used, the most commercial supplements, they have very low values of nutrients, and they have also additives like talc or aluminum or titanium, things that are not food. So while there, in the last 35 years with FDA data, there's never been a death. So it's not a question of safety, because probably most of food found in a supermarket, it's a lot more dangerous than the supplements. But you are not going to have an effective correction of deficiencies using this type of supplements.
Got it.
So you need to take supplements that have nutrients in a form that the body can use. Like, but let's take folic acid, folic acids, okay? So folic acid is an artificial form of folate. And half of the population can use that and half cannot. So if you're going to make a study, as it has been also during pregnancy, we prescribed folic acid to pregnant women, you are going to find an improvement. So those who took folic acid, they had an improvement. But this was only half of the population. The other half that could not transform the folic acid didn't get an improvement. But even in this case, half of the population had a benefit in relation to those that didn't take it. But this is not enough, because if you want to help everyone, you have to give the the form of folate that the body can use. And the same is for many other forms of supplements and so on. So it's very, very important, the quality, not to have additives and to have formulas that have a lot of nutrients. So you're not going to prescribe 166 supplements in the morning, 166 in the evening, and take a huge amount of excipients and colorants and so on. It's not going to work.
Yeah, good point. Okay, I used to be in the habit, I wanted to ask you about this supplement as well. I used to be in the habit of telling everybody that they needed to take omega-3 supplements, for example. And then over the years, I've started to appreciate, obviously, different fats have different levels of fragility depending on how they're handled. And some people make the claim that an omega-3 supplement has already been rancidified through the production of the oil itself. So where do you stand on that as far as like omega-3 supplementation? Is it something we should just be getting from seafood, or are you seeing some high quality omega-3 supplements that work great?
Yes, this is true. Omega-3 and omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids, they oxidize very easily. They just, even because we measure them, just even the action of measuring them oxidize. They disappear from the sample. So you need to have special conditions of working with the samples that you have to measure omega-3 and omega-6 in order to be able to measure them, because they just disappear, they oxidize, and they disappear from the, they're so sensible and easy to be damaged. We use supplements that we measure for oxidation. We have a very high level of a threshold of very low, actually, threshold of oxidation, because this is very important. And when you use this type of supplements, you have great results, because omega-3 are necessary for the production of molecules that resolve inflammation. It's not, because from one part we consume a lot of omega-6. So if you do not diminish the omega-6, and particularly the omega-6 that are from processed foods that are highly oxidized, you can provide omega-3 and you have no results. You have to diminish the intake of omega-6, oxidized omega-6, and then you have to provide some omega-3 to favor it, to improve the outcome of the resolution of inflammation. Because inflammation, another thing that is not probably known, is the process of repair after a damage. So you have a damage and the body starts repairing, and this process is inflammation. But if the body cannot complete this process, it cannot bring it to resolution, inflammation becomes chronic.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Omega-3 are essential for the resolution. They participate in the production of molecules that are called resolvins, because they resolve inflammation. So you need them, but you need them to take from a source of good quality, or a good quality fish or seafood, or a good quality supplement.
Got it. Got it. And then again, how would somebody know that they are getting a high quality supplement? Do you have any like standards, or do you really want to be testing to see if the supplement you're taking is actually giving you the nutrients it says?
All the supplements that I'm using, I use supplements that I have used in clinical trials, so I know the certificates of the products of each element used to make the supplements, and used independent labs to measure them, and the measurements are done also at the start of the production, during production, and at the end after the packaging. So we use very high standard to have this type of results.
Got it. Got it. Can you take us through the process of you working with a new patient, what that process kind of looks like, what the testing looks like, and then how this has, practically changed your practice, and what types of kind of case studies you see? What are typical results that you see with people that are struggling from autoimmune diseases? Is this something that they're going to be managing, or is this something that really in most cases can be reversed?
Yes. So there are a lot of questions. So
for a lot. Sorry about that.
When a patient starts, he starts by making a visit with a medical doctor. So we take his medical anamnesis and what's his condition, medications, tests that he's done lately. And we also then he makes a visit, an interview with a nutritionist, a clinical nutritionist. So we write down the anamnesis, the nutritional anamnesis and allergies and what he's eating now. Because in order with metabolomic analysis to evaluate the results, you have to know the input. Because metabolomic analysis measures the output of the body. But in order to evaluate, we have to know what is coming in. And then measuring metabolomic analysis, and we put all the data together and we evaluate. So the first visit, we make a medical interview, a nutritional interview, and then we take the samples of blood and urine. And then we need about 2 weeks to evaluate them. And then we do another visit with the results in hand, and we prescribe supplementation, changes in the pharmaceutical regimen if necessary, and also in diet. And then usually in order, as I said, for most chronic conditions, we need about 2 years, 2.5 years to get the person in optimal condition. Most of the changes the body goes through is in the first 6 to 8 months. His condition in about 80-85% of cases is stable after 1 year. It's improved by 70%, and then continues to improve for the next year and a half. As I said, we recently published our results, and we had 95.7% of our patients experience improvement. This is in relation to the conventional approach that 30 to 60%, with an average of 40% in the clinical studies, they see an improvement. But 95.7% of improvement of people, of our patients improved. And we see improvements in inflammation, in energy levels. Energy levels is a very important indicator, marker, because the first to go down is energy. And because this is a damage at the level of the mitochondria, the production, energy production units of the body, 90% of the energy produced in the mitochondria. Sometimes it's difficult for the people to understand this type of problem, because initially the body, when has lower energy, it releases more stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. So a person may seem to have a lot of energy, but he's stressed. It's not like, if we go to the car example, it's like, I don't know, going 115 high in fifth gear or sixth gear, but with low efficiency, it's like going 115 in third gear or second gear. So the effort of the body is a lot higher, and the speed of accumulation of damage is high.
Got it. Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
So this is the approach we do. What were the other questions? Because
no, that was it. That was
Yeah.
no, that was perfect. I asked you a bunch all at once, so I apologize for that.
no problem.
You also mentioned the health of the gut, and we know how important that is. Although our studies of the microbiome are quite in their infancies, do we feel a little bit more comfortable and confident now that we know, say, like the types of probiotics that we can be recommending, different strains or things like that, or is that also highly individualized?
Yes, you are right. The problem with the microbiome is that we don't know what would be the ideal or optimum. So to bypass this, we measure markers that indicate a dysfunction of the microbiome. For example, if there is a lack of certain beneficial bacteria, we have a lack of production of certain B vitamins that are produced from the bacteria. So we measure these markers. Or if there is an increase in pathogens, they produce some metabolites that are released from these pathogens. So, or if there is an increased permeability, damage from the intestinal mucosa, we have some other markers. So we go for some markers that indicates the function or the dysfunction of the microbiome, not specific microbes, and we act then on that.
Got it. Yeah, I like that approach. And of course, you mentioned all the foods that have the highest nutritional value, which makes me and a lot of listeners very happy. I've been, coming up on 6 years of eating a carnivore diet, mostly red meat and eggs. I'm also buying mostly conventional meat that we get at the store here, and so it's not grass-fed, grass-finished all the time. Not what anybody would call like quote unquote the highest quality, although I would contend that it is still very high quality. Do you have any worries about people that are on a carnivore diet that they're missing out on certain nutrients, or that they could become nutrient deficient in things if they did it for too long of a time, or is that just not something that you've observed?
So we give a priority for our patients. We specify that we give emphasis that they need to eat meat from ruminants. Because chicken and pork, have a different metabolism. They are monogastric. They have one stomach. So they have a type of metabolism. Whatever they eat, it passes through to the meat. While ruminants, they have a completely different metabolism. They have 4 stomachs. They ruminate. They have a very long intestine and a microbiome that elaborates whatever they eat. So if you give corn in the best case scenario to the chicken or the pork, the meat is gonna have very high levels of omega-6. So it's pro-inflammatory. We don't want that. So but ruminants, even if you provide them with corn to eat corn, which is not the best, but their percentage of polyunsaturated fatty acids in their fat, it's up to 1 to 5%. It's very low. It's similar to the one that the human body should have. So by eating ruminant meat like lamb, goat, and grass-fed meat, or even not grass-fed meat, but ruminant from cow meat, it's safe. It's very safe. There's no, it's been measured. There's no alteration, no huge difference in hormones or antibiotics levels, even though the animal may be given antibiotics or hormones. Of course, if it's grass-fed, the nutritional value is higher. It's higher. Sometimes even though we usually refer that plant-based diet creates a deficiency of B12, sometimes we see that even people that eat a lot of meat or eat a lot, even liver that is high in B12, they cannot increase their levels because their stomach is not, or intestine is not working well. So it's not only the quality of the meat, it's also the ability of the body to digest, to produce digestive enzymes, of the intestinal or gastric mucosa to absorb nutrients. So you have to address these things. But eating this type of food, meat, eggs, it's a first step, very good first step.
Okay, no, that's great. Well, I've certainly learned a lot in this conversation. Is there anything that I haven't asked you yet that I still should? Is there anything that we still need to cover as far as this topic and how we can help people with not only the macronutrients, but also the micronutrients in their diet?
I believe we covered the basics. We covered most of the things. And that people that are going to listen to this podcast are going to have a picture of what can help them or not.
Well, I agree. This has been very educational, Dr. Tsoukalas. I really appreciate your care in learning about this stuff and educating people about it. I think it's very, very helpful. And we do worry about macronutrients, and it is important. It's the bigger part of our nutrition.
Course,
it's part, but we often don't talk about the micronutrients and those importance. And so I really like your work and can't wait to see what you come out with in the future. I know you're always very busy and putting out tons of studies and lots of papers and stuff like that. So definitely looking forward to that.
I'd be happy to come back. Thank you.
Oh, please come back anytime. We would love to host you again and learn more from you anytime. Yeah, this has been a great conversation. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Because we don't have an English website, because we mostly act in, but I can send you a link so you can attach it. We have some pages in English with articles and info about what we do. So people can link to that, can find my site is drtsoukalas.com, but if you go just to that, it's in Greek. But I'm going to send you a link for the English pages of the.
That would be great. That would be great. Yeah, we'll be sure to link that in the notes. We also have the link for your book, which you wrote, I think about 10 years ago, but it is still in print and people can still go to Amazon and buy that.
I just finished my second book. It's going to be available in Italian, in English too, in a few months.
Oh, great.
And yes, when I'm going to release, I'm going to text you.
Please do. We'll link it in the notes and definitely host you again so we can talk all about it. I would love to learn about that.
And we follow, I have to say that we have a lot of people from US and all over the world at the distance. We can send a kit to someone so we can collect samples of urine and blood, even in another country. And we have great results.
Oh, great. Great. Yeah, I was actually going to ask about that. So you can work with people internationally.
Yes, we do that. We have a lot of patients.
That's fantastic.
All over the world, yes.
Okay, great. Well, we'll be sure to link up all of that. And yeah, this has been an awesome conversation. So thank you so very much for taking the time out of your busy life to be on our show today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Of course, it's been an honor. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.